Tim, thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Hey, no problem, man.
Now, you were born in Maine, played numerous sports as a kid. How'd you get into MMA?
Kind of fell into it, to be honest. I did karate growing up, and I wrestled in high school, and all of a sudden this UFC thing kind of popped around, and I'm like, hey, that's awesome. I started watching it, loved it, and had the opportunity to start doing some grappling and stuff under Marcus Davis. He was going out down to Boston and training with some guys down there. When he was coming back here, he was teaching me and some of the guys. We all worked together at the Bounty Tavern. Marcus was like the head bouncer, and so we started learning it that way. And as it progressed, there was opportunity to go to Rhode Island and do an MMA fight that was open hand, 1 7-minute round. I said, sign me up. I'll see if I can do that. I like that sport. I went down, knocked the guy out in 17 seconds, and I was hooked.
And you mentioned Marcus Davis. How'd that come together?
Marcus was a big name back in Bangor, Maine. That's where I ended up moving, where I was playing semi-pro football, and we were working together. So they just basically, we were doing it for better self-defense, and jiu-jitsu is a better way to handle people in a bar. If they're drunk or whatever. You slap somebody in a choke real quick and say, hey, I'm going to put you out if you don't fucking walk out the door. So they would walk out the door or they would go to sleep. Better than hitting somebody or kicking someone, knocking them out that way and stuff.
So you mentioned you were competing in some amateur tournaments, some grappling tournaments. How'd you make it over to the UFC in the early days?
I started, picking up the progress. I won the big main skirmish. The absolute champion. I was the gi champion, the no gi champion, and then the absolute champion where anybody could enter. And I submitted everybody. And so we're kind of like, well, you actually aren't too bad on the ground either. You have a boxing background, a karate background. But I was just struggling trying to find, I'd show up at fights and guys wouldn't fight me. I'd walk in, like, I ain't freaking fighting that guy. He's huge. So then I was running out of training partners and stuff, and went to my first UFC in New Jersey and met Miletich and those guys, and they kind of welcomed me with open arms, like, Jesus. Pat was like, "You're a big son of a bitch. You're big enough to eat hay and shit in the middle of the road." I'll never forget that comment. And he's like, "You asked me if I trained?" I said, "Yeah, a little bit, but I struggle finding training partners." And he's like, "Come to Iowa. We got plenty of training partners for you." So, he gave me his number. We stayed in contact, and I think it was probably 3 or 4 months later, I went to Iowa for 2 weeks to train.
And you mentioned your size, 6'8". You were the biggest guy in most fights. How'd that help you early on in your career? Was it easier to get people to train with? Was it easier to get opponents, harder to get opponents?
Oh, it was definitely harder. It was, guys would, they wouldn't see me in person, but, like 6'8", 300 pounds, whatever, back then I was playing semi-pro football. I was, I think I was a pretty good athlete. So, when you walk up and you impose your, 6'8", 330 pounds on a guy that's 6 foot, he's like, excuse me, he's like, holy shit, 6'8" is big. So they would change their mind real quick.
And so your training partners, you were training under Pat Miletich. You said that a second ago, one of the top MMA gyms at the time. Why do you think Pat was able to procure such high-quality fighters at that early stage of the sport, relatively?
I think because Pat knew iron sharpens iron. To be the best, you got to train with the best. You got to surround yourself with people that are better than you. So Pat would travel all over, the Midwest to find boxers that were better boxers than him, find kickboxers that were better kickboxers than him, and jiu-jitsu guys that were better jiu-jitsu, wrestlers that were better wrestlers. And he knew if you got beat up in the gym and you were training with these guys every day, that the gym is a lot tougher than an actual fight. So, people started seeing the success at this, and basically he built it and they came.
And it was tough financially at that time in the sport. You were training with guys like Matt Hughes, who were at the top of the list back in the day. Did you just look at them and say, hey, one day I'm going to be up there, or, the money's not very good right now. I hope that at some point it gets better?
Money was never a drive for me in this sport. I did it because I loved it. I enjoyed it. It was fun. The camaraderie we had at our gym was awesome. And to be honest with you, being the UFC heavyweight champ never really was a focus for me. My focus was to get in the UFC. And then once I get in the UFC, they're like, hey, you're not too bad of a fighter. You want to do a title fight? We're like, yeah, sure. We have nothing to lose. I'm like a second fight in the UFC. I'll fight for the title. And it just kind of happened. We didn't even realize, that it was going to happen as easy as it did.
And the sport wasn't as popular as it is now. Do you think fighters back then had that drive in them, that natural commitment that fighters today maybe don't have? They chase the limelight or the spotlight or something else?
Yeah, I don't think the sport is what it used to be. And I hear that every day, if not once a day, that the sport's not what it used to be. People don't like it as much. People don't watch it anymore. Back in the day when we were fighting, there was 6 events a year. So every card you look forward to, you knew exactly every single fighter on it. It wasn't oversaturated. It wasn't watered down. I mean, nowadays, you got A, B, and C level fighters fighting because they have so many shows. It's just watered down. It's not as good as it used to be.
And Pat's gym ultimately fizzled out in terms of being one of the best in the business. Could they just not recruit top fighters, or what was it related to?
No, the main thing is we all got older, and guys started going their separate ways. Guys had opportunities to make money at other gyms, and people were throwing money at all of us, saying, hey, we'll give you, $100,000. You start your own gym in St. Louis. Hey, we got a place in Salt Lake City. Come here and be the head trainer. We'll pay for your rent, your vehicle, your food. Come to Nebraska, open your own gym. And it just kind of happened that way. And, Pat was at a point in his, he's done fighting, and, the IFL kind of helped out and was paying his wages, but he had the opportunity to better himself and better his family in commentary to where he could make a really good living and not hurt his body at all, because his body's been banged up for so many years, and he took the opportunity, and I don't blame him. I would have too. Him being the head coach, once Pat kind of stepped aside and started doing the commentating and stuff like that, guys just like, well, Pat's not around as much. I need more attention, or I need, more guys or whatever. And, as we got older, I had no interest in building a gym or doing anything like that. Once I kind of got out of the sport, I wanted to be out of it.
Understood. So as your career progressed, you obviously became top heavyweight in the company, fought Rigo Rodriguez, UFC 41. What was the game plan going into that fight?
Basically, the game plan was to go in there and impose my will on him. We knew that I was a better striker than he was, and we knew that I was really tough to get down. We kind of feared, if he got down and got on top of us up against the cage, it was going to be a bad night for me. So basically, just go in there, get in his face, let him know that I wasn't scared, I wasn't going to back down, and defend the takedown and throw big punches. And that's exactly what we did, and got lucky and landed one of them in the first round.
And these days, winning the title is associated with so many things. You can get pay-per-view points and all these other things. Back then, how different was it?
Oh, it was very different. My first fight in the UFC, my first world title fight was $40,000 and $40,000. So I made $80,000. No pay-per-view buys. I never got pay-per-view buys at all. We tried to get pay-per-view buys on my last contract that I signed with them, and they wouldn't do it. And that's, a lot of the reason why I left when they wanted me to re-sign. They wanted me to re-sign, and I couldn't get pay-per-view buys, and I wouldn't do it. We knew what, that was when Brock Lesnar got signed, and we knew exactly what his contract was, and we asked for his same contract he got, and they said they wouldn't do it. So then my return to that was, well, okay, I'll sign the deal you want, but which was going to be 100, which is what I ended on. 100,000 to show, 100,000 to win. He was getting 300 to show, 300 to win, and pay-per-view buys. So we said, okay, well, let me fight Brock Lesnar, and if I win, I get his contract. And they wouldn't do that either. They say what they wanted to build him and this and that. So we kind of had the opportunity to leave them when we did, and we took the opportunity and ran with it.
Different times for sure. So you win the world title, you fight Frank Mir. When your arm broke and that reaction was so nonchalant, was it kind of just adrenaline, or were you just displaced from the moment in a bad injury like that?
I was pissed the fuck off. I mean, I felt it break. When I thought I was safe, and then I heard my arm go pop, pop, pop. And I said, he just fucking broke my arm. I'm going to kill him. And that's when I picked him up with a broken arm, and I spiked him, and he went limp on me. And I picked him up the second time, and Herb jumped in and stopped it. I really was confident enough to, if I was able to slam him one more time and start raining down left to his face, it would have been over. But Herb saved his life that night.
As bad as it looked on screen, you looked completely unfazed, as if it's not like nothing happened.
Well, I mean, obviously there's a lot of adrenaline going, and the pain tolerance of all fighters is extremely high. I mean, how many average men can get punched in the face as hard as you can by another heavyweight? You just kind of look at them and smile. I mean, there isn't too many people in the world that can do that. So our pain tolerance is abnormal from anything else. So, a broken arm is a broken arm. It broke, and it hurt afterwards, but it wasn't that big of a deal. I know lots of fighters have gotten broken limbs and still keep fighting. I've broken my hand several times in fights and keep fighting,
Did you train jiu-jitsu going into that fight, kind of to prevent being caught by Frank? He was known as a guy that could take an arm.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He threw a lazy kick like where Rico did to me, and I powered through it with a straight right, and he just kind of grabbed me and pulled guard. So that's how he got me to the ground, It just he kind of grabbed me and pulled. I think he knew he couldn't get me down any other way. He wouldn't be able to, shoot or take down a double leg or anything like that. It worked out well for him. And like I said, I think my arms are so much longer than anybody else's. He had a steel cup on, so he used that as a fulcrum, but my elbow was out. Rule of thumb is if your elbow is outside of the arm bar, you're safe. But my forearm is so long, it didn't get saved.
And how long was the recovery after that fight? Was it something that kind of you had to take some time off, or you thought, okay, you can take a little rest, get back in there quickly? You got to make, obviously, like I said, you got to make money, you got to keep fighting.
I was in there pretty quickly. I fought 5 months after my arm break. I fought Wes Sims and knocked him out with my right arm. Hit him with the right, dropped him, and jumped on him and started raining down big rights and knocked him out. And then I fought for the title again after that. And then it was against Andre Arlovski. He dropped me, and he jumped on my leg and on my leg and hit a heel hook, and I felt pop, 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 and I immediately just panic tapped. To do all over again, if my arm hadn't been broken in the first fight, I probably would have fought out of it a little better, or at least tried, because he didn't break it. And he was just, whatever, getting turned or whatever. I just freaked out so quick that I tapped.
What was so tough about Andre as an opponent? Was it his power, his speed?
Andre's, yeah. I mean, he's fast. He hits hard. At the time, he was a smaller heavyweight than most of us. Well, I guess I wasn't really small. That was kind of the average size of the heavyweight. I was kind of the abnormal size. But, yeah, he's a heavy hitter, and he was fast.
Was he different at the time? He just seemed as a guy that moved differently, thought differently. He was ahead of the game, it looked.
I don't think so, no. I think he was just a fast, powerful heavyweight.
You guys fought at a time where the UFC was lesser known. How important do you think your 3 fights ultimately had a 4th down the line? How important do you think those fights were to the sport, to the heavyweight division?
I think it was very important for the UFC and the heavyweight division. All of a sudden, you're seeing 2 heavyweights do a stand-up fight for 25 minutes going back and forth. That was that 3rd fight. It was 25 minutes. It showed that we had endurance. It showed that we could, just go out there and throw bombs. My hands hurt for a week after that fight. I hit him so much. I couldn't shake hands or anything. I couldn't even, use the bathroom and wipe myself, for the first 3 or 4 days because my hands were just so swollen and sore. I don't even know what the punch count was, but I'm willing to bet, it was at least, 50 landed each round. We were going at it, that 3rd round fight. I thought that really showed the evolve of the heavyweight division, the evolve of the sport for the heavyweights.
And after your first loss to Arlovski, you go on a win streak for a long, long time, and you get Randy Couture in 2007. Did you underestimate him in that fight? He was obviously the much older guy going in.
Oh, absolutely. I actually just hung out with Randy 2 weeks ago. He came here to the Quad Cities. We held a charity event for his charity and fundraiser and stuff. And we were, shooting the shit about that. And I trained with Randy many a times before that fight. He flew me out to Oregon, and I lived with him and stuff, helped him get ready for a bunch of different fights. So Randy and I had a very good friendship. He was a great friend, and I think I kind of gave him a little too much respect in that fight. You know, Randy looked at it as a sport, and so did I. And I'm like, it's Randy Couture. I mean, I've sparred this guy at least 100 times. No big deal. I couldn't put the kill switch on for when I fought him, and you know he could, and he came away victoriously.
And you were the striker going into that fight. When that first punch hit, did you kind of say, okay, now I gotta, retool?
No, not really. I mean, he caught me off guard because Randy would always do that little move. He would, fake the lead front leg and shoot a double, and he's done that to me 50 times before. And so when he faked that lead leg, inside lead leg kick, I dropped my hands to, catch the underhooks, and he threw overhand right instead. So, I mean, it was just a sneaky little tactical move he pulled, and it worked out well for him.
And after the Couture fight, you got a terrific fight with Nogueira. You beat him up for a whole lot, and you got caught in a choke. How durable was he? You hit him with some big shots.
Oh, he's very durable. I mean, I dropped him 2 or 3 different times. I couldn't believe he was still in there, and I made a simple mistake, and he capitalized on it, and congrats to him.
He was being hit so hard in those fights, and And then
just
in the
like
end,
the Fedor fights, the Crow Cop fights, the Bob Sapp fights, everybody did it to him. But he was just like a cockroach. He would never die.
Unbelievable. So you leave the UFC in 2008. You sign with Affliction. And you mentioned earlier the UFC was bringing Brock up at the time, throwing a ton of money at him. Why did you decide to depart at the time? Was it just a money thing, or did you want to try something different at that stage of your career?
It was a lot of things. It was a respect thing. It was a money thing. I didn't feel like I was treated very well at the UFC. I was being overlooked in certain areas with the whole Brock thing, and I wanted to fight Fedor, and I didn't think he would ever do a UFC deal. So I wanted to see if I wanted to go out there and prove myself. I really thought I could beat Fedor, and I made a mistake in that fight as well. I would have liked to have had that fight back again because shortly after that he got beat pretty easily by a couple, 2 or 3 guys. He was just the man that night. I wasn't. He performed, and I didn't.
And Affliction, they signed so many great fighters at the time, and the contracts were huge. The payroll for the first event was enormous. Did you think it was sustainable? Did you know it was going to be a few events and then they were going to fizzle out?
No, I signed a 3-fight deal with them. I thought they were going to stick around. It would have been great if they did. I would have been set for life. But, things happened, and UFC came in and swallowed them up and honored everybody's contract but mine and Orlovsky's, and we both got screwed on the deal.
And how hard is it with fighting Fedor? Was he too fast? Was he too quick? Was he too strong? Was he too different? I mean, he fought in Japan for years, whereas you were out here.
None of the above. None of the above. He just caught me. He just caught me with a left hook that rocked me and jumped on me, submitted me real quick. It is what it is. I made a mistake, and he capitalized.
Was the punching power something you were used to?
Yeah, all heavyweights hit hard. So, that wasn't anything that I hadn't seen or felt before.
What were the talks with Affliction afterwards at the time? Did you anticipate fighting somebody else? Who was on the come up that you were going to fight?
Yeah, I was supposed to fight. If I won, I was going to fight Josh Barnett. If I lost, I was supposed to fight Paul Bontello. And I got fucking knocked out by Ray Mercer in a stupid fight. And so Affliction asked me not to fight on that second show just to make sure I was fine, headwise or whatever. And then did the second show happen? Yeah, the second show happened. I'm sorry. No, how did that work? So the third show I was going to fight Paul Bontello. The second show, I don't know why. They didn't have the money to pay me because they paid everybody else so high or whatever. I'm not really sure. But then the third show, I think Barnett tested positive, and with that happening, a lot of the guys who were the backers didn't like that negative feedback, and UFC came in and brought him up, and they agreed to it. So yeah, I was supposed to fight Paul Bontello, and later on we did fight, and I ended up knocking Paul out. So that was a fight I would have liked to have had with Affliction. So I got paid a lot more money in Affliction than when I got paid in the other organization.
And why'd you take on Ray Mercer? Why'd you agree to that fight?
It was supposed to be a boxing fight, and I was like, well, it's boxing, so it can't go against my MMA record. And then when I got turned to MMA, he got in my head. he was running his mouth saying I couldn't stand up with him no matter what, this and that. And he got me. He got into my head, and I'm like, I can stand up with anybody. In reality, why take that chance? I knew if I took him down, the fight would have been over in 30 seconds. But I let my ego get to me, and him talking all that shit, it worked, and it made me stand up with him. And he caught me with an overhand right. I actually dropped him when we both connected at the same time. I dropped him, and he dropped me. He just came through quicker.
Was it harder fighting a fighter of that caliber? He was obviously a lot older, but was it different?
No, it wasn't different at all. I looked at it as another MMA fight. I mean, he just hit hard as hell. He's the first and only person to ever knock me out.
So after the Fedor fight, you fight in some other organizations, like you mentioned, and try to work your way back into the UFC. What was the biggest change that you see in the company now, as opposed to the way they do business than when you were there?
From what I understand, nobody. I mean, if I ever wanted to talk or see Dana, I would just call him a text and say, hey, I'm in Vegas. I'm going to come to the office. Yeah, come on in. I'd go there and do it. From what I understand, you can't even do that now. It takes like appointments and months to get a meeting with them. I mean, yeah, it's oversaturated now. I mean, we were on Spike back then because I fought on Spike, but it's just totally different now. I don't think they care about their fighters like they used to, and not that they ever really cared about me, but I mean, it's just totally different now. I had to fight 15 times before I got a shot in the UFC, and now guys have got 3 or 4 fights and they're in the UFC. It just proves to show you that it's oversaturated and there's A, B, and C level fighters.
And there was a time when you tried to work your way back into the company. It didn't work out. Why do you think that was?
Dana held a grudge. I mean, plain and simple. He got pissed off because I left and went to Affliction.
And after that, you could have went to Bellator or Strikeforce. I know Bellator came around down the line a bit. Why'd you never do that?
I was the highest paid heavyweight outside of the UFC by fighting, overseas and stuff like that. I was making more money than some of the guys in the top 10 of the UFC. So I was being paid very well for my name and, my attributes. And I did well outside of the UFC. And they actually they wanted me back in the UFC. They sent me a contract and we took it, we signed it. And then when they were supposed to sign it, they changed their mind at the last minute. So I kind of got burned again by them. A lot of people don't know about that about them, but that did happen. You
transitioned some other endeavors. What are you up to these days?
Well, I have a hunting show that's going to be airing on the Sportsman's Channel. It's currently been airing the last 3 years on Pursuit Channel. We're obviously on YouTube and all social media outlets, but I do a lot of hunting. I hunt over the Midwest. I like deer hunting. I do some turkey hunting, some bear hunting, but that's mainly what I do. And I currently have a 7-year-old son, and he's gotten involved in wrestling. This will be his 3rd year wrestling, so I'm an assistant coach for his wrestling team as well. So, it's kind of like the next generation. I'm looking out for my little boy. I'm being a dad. And I'm doing a lot of hunting. I'm working on the hunting show.
And there are fighters, that have such a hard time transitioning to other things, whether it's TV or broadcasting or acting. Why were you able to make that transition?
I've always been a hard worker, and I've been in the hunting industry for a long time. I've hunted my whole life, and I kind of set it up back when I was UFC Heavyweight Champ. When I got into the hunting industry, people are asking me to be on their hunting shows. What would cost if they could pay me, and sponsors want to pay me. And I'm like, look, I don't need your money right now. I don't want your money. I go, just remember me, eventually I'm going to be in the hunting industry, the outdoor industry, and I'm going to need sponsors. I'm going to have my own show. And I appreciate it if you just think about me and stand by me and support me then. And I was very fortunate enough that I got with some great sponsors, and that's exactly what they did.
And you mentioned your kid does some wrestling. If he ever wanted to go into MMA the way the landscape is now, what would you say?
I'm going to let him do whatever he wants. I'm going to try not to let him fight just because I don't need him to fight. A lot of people, want their kids to fight because they want to live through them because they couldn't do it. Well, I did it. I was the best of the best in the world at one time. My body is all stove to shit. I'm all beat up. I'm sore every day, and I just don't want that for him when he's 40. So, I'm going to try to say, hey, look, man, you know, see how much pain I'm in, how I'm bouncing around. Let's maybe think about something else.
When you look back at your career, obviously such a great career, what was the top moment? What do you look back now and say, wow, that was something that I'm really happy I did?
I think winning the title the second time was the biggest achievement, just because I had to work my way back to that position to be number one contender. I had to beat a guy that was unbeatable, that everybody was scared of, who has knocked pretty much everybody out that was in front of him. And then I went out there and knocked him out in the first minute and a half. I think that was the biggest achievement for me, was winning the title the second time.
Do you watch the sport a lot now? Do you take an interest in it?
Yeah, I love the sport. I will always watch the sport. I still have friends that fight. So, I definitely watch it. I watch all the free ones, obviously. I will not pay for a pay-per-view. I just won't. I refuse to. So if somebody else pays for it, I'll watch it. But, I won't buy a pay-per-view. Stipe's the big dog right now. I still think he is. As far as anybody else, I don't see a lot of great, talented heavyweights. I've beaten, I think, a couple that are currently still fighting. Brandon Vera is like the ONE UFC heavyweight champ, and I beat him. Ben Rothwell is still fighting. I beat him. So, I think if I was in the UFC today, if I was healthy, I could possibly be in the top 10, maybe probably the top 20, just because I know Arlovsky's still in there and stuff, and Josh Barnett. And so I can't get healthy. My knees are shot, and I'm always in pain.
And you never got into coaching or doing anything else in the sport. Why is that?
I kind of figured once I stepped away, I stepped away. It's not for me. I don't mind helping people out and stuff like that, but I just can't commit to it every single day, twice a day. I have things in my life that I want to do. I retired for a reason. I have a son now, so he takes precedent over anything.
Understood. Tim, it's been so great of you to join us. Where can people go to find out more about you, how to get in touch with you?
Obviously, you're going to hit me up on all social medias. Hit Squad Outdoors with Tim Sylvia, actual Tim Sylvia itself. We have the YouTube channel. My show airs on Outdoor Adventure Network, on Roku. It airs on Pursuit Channel, the first 3 seasons. And now January 31st, 6 p.m. on Saturday nights will be the first show on the Sportsman's Channel this year.
Very nice, very nice. Tim, once again, thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Hey, no problem, man. Thanks.